Welcome to the Vote Common Good daily podcast. Good Monday morning to you. And those of you that keep track of such things, it's Easter Monday. Some people get the day off of work. I'm not sure who it is, but somebody works with us at Vote Common Good. Asked, hey, are we on a regular work schedule on Monday? Yep. At least around here, we take Easter Monday, like a regular old day. It's an exciting day around here. I think it's the 5th of April, which to a lot of people means that the NCAA basketball tournament is alive and well. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about that. We will talk about 9 other topics as well here on our news roundup, because on Mondays we take a look at the news, trying to give ourselves an open-eyed, hope-filled, optimistic view of the world that calls us to let our light shine in a way to make it even better if we can. And I'm Doug Padgett here in Minneapolis. Would love for you to tell us where you are and what it is that you're doing and where you're coming from. We'd love to know about that. And I'm joined on Monday here by the show producer, Daniel Dietrich.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, how was your Easter? What'd you find yourself up to?
It was good. I slept in, which is the second time. I slept in last year too because it was a pandemic. But yeah, it's like the first time in, I don't know, 15 or 20 years that I haven't had to put on an Easter production, and so that was kind of relaxing. I was into that part of it.
But you're feeling pretty. I felt the same way for a lot of years, 20 plus. We would do at Solomon's Porch, the church that I was pastor at. We would do an Easter sunrise gathering. So we'd meet just before sunrise. Yeah, I loved it. It was just my favorite of all of them. And then yesterday I slept till 8:30. Like the middle of the morning. Yeah, it was really something. So hey, if you all celebrated Easter yesterday, tell us what you did too in the comments if you're there. If you're just listening on the podcast, shoot us an email over at podcast@votecommon.good. We'd love to do that. All right, so let's talk a little NCAA. I guess we have to. The basketball matters a lot. And the Stanford, I don't know who they are, what their nickname is, but the Stanford team won the NCAA basketball championship in the women's division. And again, glad the women are getting some big billing. The fact they had to play on Easter Sunday seemed a little surprising to me. The men's championship game is tonight, but congratulations to the Stanford. I don't know, the Stanford Bruins or somebody. And it was a nail biter, I think they won by 1 point. And the same thing happened over the weekend where I think the Gonzaga team is not the one that won at a last second buzzer beater.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible. I'm not super up on all the sports, but I caught the end of that game, and it was just an incredible moment.
Incredible moment. I was a college basketball player, and now I don't follow it at all.
Get out of here. I didn't know that about you.
Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah, it was,
You got the height for it, so.
Yeah, and fleet of foot, which I was not. Yeah, but a college basketball player. And now for some reason, I don't know why I don't follow sports anymore. I just, I think it's swapped out for like other newsy things that matter to me. And, but I'm trying to be better. I thought maybe tonight I would pay attention to the basketball game because I paid attention to the Stanford game.
Yeah, I love sports. I just don't have the bandwidth to follow it as closely as I'd like. So,
well, have you tried upgrading your DSL? Oh, your personal bandwidth. This is your own personal
mental, emotional.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why. I think. It's just become, it feels odd to me now for some reason. I don't know, in the last 5 or 6 years, to pay attention to sports. I'm not entirely sure why. I would think that somebody in my life stage would get more into sports. I've just sort of gone the other way. So anyway, happy basketball time to all of you who picked the Gonzaga team for the men's and the Stanford team for the women's, and that you were able to live out your basketball enjoyment this weekend. And they're starting to bring people back together, Dan. Did you hear this? Into arenas again for some of the major men's and women's sports events like hockey and basketball and obviously baseball. Mm-hmm. And it's starting. So, former president, failed president, and
twice impeached
president, Donald Trump was he was only off by 1 year when he said we'll be open by Easter. He just had the wrong year. So he's the kind of guy you want to listen to. Seems like we're about to really move this opening up in some ways, and that takes us to this COVID conversation. Look, Minneapolis, University of Minnesota. Epidemiologist Michael Osterholm is one of the experts that they turn to in the news to talk about what's happening, with COVID. And this friend of ours, Mr. Osterholm, he tends to have a dire view of COVID. I don't know. We get a little bit more Osterholm news here in the Twin Cities where I'm from, because he's local guy, gone big time. In his field, and a lot of people pay attention to him, and people just keep saying like, "Man, Osterholm, you just really have a dark view." Thing is, he's been right just about every time, right? So every time someone's like, "Come on, Osterholm, you're being a little heavy," he's suggesting that we are on the brink of a fourth surge. There's going to be a big one. He sees the numbers happening that way because of some of the indicators, and apparently this time it's this variant that these little viruses are smart, and they figure out somehow in some kind of viral intelligence how to mutate in order to be more catchy, and I guess ultimately more deadly. I'm not entirely sure why a virus wants to be deadly, but they are. At least this one is. So kids are getting it. Dan, did you see this?
Yeah.
More and more kids and people.
And young
the
people.
number one age range for people in the hospital now is 30 to 40 with this new variant. It's not the older folk that it was with the more classic, with your classic COVID-19.
Right. Yeah, Michigan is on the rise, which is troubling because Michigan really put in some pretty severe restrictions, and obviously there was a lot of pushback to those restrictions. But Michigan tried a lot of things to limit the spread, and numbers are up there. I don't know if it's directly related to easing off those restrictions or what the root cause is of this rise. But yeah, it's troubling to see a lot of 30s and 40s ending up in the hospital now, which wasn't the case early on, it seemed like.
It's this bizarre foot race, isn't it? This foot race of the vaccine to the cases, like they're now in this 5 or 6 week period. So I got my vaccine right here, Pfizer 1.
Got number one.
Took in the right arm. I was thinking about getting Pfizer 2 in the other arm. I don't know how that works, but I was thinking like one of each, like 2 places. But I will not get my second vaccine. I got the first vaccine on March 31st. And I don't get my next one until April 27th. And then they say that the benefit of being fully vaccinated comes 2 weeks after that. So that puts it somewhere into early May. So it's a month. And this is why they worried about some of this, of the
Fourth
uptick.
wave.
Because you can still contract and feel the devastation of the virus after your first dose, even though they say there's some, it helps some people some, but really that second dose is what's necessary. And so people that are just now getting scheduled, like today or tomorrow or later in this week, will get their schedule for their first vaccine. That might be a week out. And then they have 3 weeks after that vaccine to get their second one. And then 2 weeks after that. This is why they're talking about 7 weeks to try to get to some kind of safety. It's really something. And do you ever see that set of highlight videos? We should put it in the show notes, like YouTube videos of sports people who celebrate too early, like the track guy that throws his arms up and somebody comes running right past him, or the person with the football and he's dancing,
slows down right before the goal. Yeah,
there's all kinds of these. That's sort of what it feels like. I feel myself doing the very same thing, right? Like, oh my gosh, I'm just want out of this thing so much, and want to kind of get, especially when the weather gets nice and you can be outside and 30% of people in our state are vaccinated and so on. It's look, and everyone's got to hang in there. And again, I know there's some people, I got some nice emails from people telling me why they don't want to get vaccinated. Let's have this argument in our society, if you should or shouldn't get vaccinated. But let's do it after you get vaccinated. Like, how about you try this? Get vaccinated, and then we can have a whole conversation about why you wish you hadn't, because this just seems to me crazy that somebody
Yeah.
wouldn't get vaccinated, Dan. I mean, I get it, I guess, in some strange way that some people don't trust it or want it. And the level of disinformation that is out is really quite incredible.
Yeah.
Not disinformation, that's a bad way to say it. The amount of information that people know that is inaccurate, or the questions that they have, it is severe around vaccinations. Like it's clear that not everyone pays attention at the same level about how vaccines work,
Right.
or why you would get them, or what's going on. So look, wouldn't it help all of us if, and I know that if you're a non-vaxxer and you don't want to get a vaccine, that for someone like me to suggest, well, just get it and we'll talk about, later why you wish you hadn't. Doesn't
Can't
take
take
you
back the
seriously.
mark of the beast, Doug.
Yes, I understand.
Once you have it, you're done.
But do you want to be the only one that doesn't have the mark of the beast when everybody else does? Like what's the game where I don't know. See, this is the thing. If we get 80% of the adult population that has the vaccine and you don't, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to survive and everyone else isn't, or something. I don't know. Can you imagine that if this thing? I mean, okay, just to play along an apocalyptic kind of narrative. What if it does go bad and 80% of people, are infected with whatever it is? That would be just globally catastrophic, right? If the vaccine's result is worse. So, I keep hearing from people who tell me why they're not going to get the vaccine for. I don't know anyone who's the mark of the beast people. I mean, I know that exists. I know that the narrative is out there that this is the government's going to embed some sort of secret tracking device in there, and then that thing is somehow connected to a global cabal of takeover that's going to take the Christians and put them into concentration camps or whatever that is that the people believe. I don't know anybody who actually holds that. The people that I know just say, I don't think we need it. I think it's a little overdone. I'm not sure it's safe.
Untested.
I don't know how it works. It's untested.
We don't know enough about this. It's like millions of people have had this vaccine now, all the different kinds of vaccines. So we do have a pretty good idea on if it's effective and if there's side effects.
I would imagine some of those people are saying, I thought this vaccine was supposed to help. Why are numbers going up when the vaccines are going out? I'm sure that's confusing if you're not paying attention to this. And it's I think because the vaccines just started here in January and February and getting out to everybody now in March, late March and April. So we're just now getting to the point. And chances are the people who are getting the vaccines are very pro do something about COVID. So they're likely, this is just my speculation, but they're likely the kinds of people who are also taking the other precautions. You know what I'm saying? Like they're probably the less likely to be infected crowd anyway, which is the scarier part of all this. If you get 20 or 30% of the population that doesn't get the adult population that doesn't get the vaccine. And then there are also the people that are like, the reason I'm not getting it is because I don't dig this. I don't think that this is an issue and a problem. Well, boy, then you're into some real trouble. Yeah. So vaccines are going to stay with us for the long haul. What do you think about these passports they're talking about? Florida just passed a law that said you can't, as a private business, require someone to show you a vaccine record or have a vaccine passport, as they call it.
Yeah.
That's amazing that they're preemptively stopping people from saying you don't get to, play unless you have been vaccinated.
I think that one's
be a real problem.
It's really interesting. It's a little more complicated than meets the eye, I think, and I can see both sides of this one. But I think at schools you got to show that your kids have had their vaccinations and
or get a sign off from a
from a doctor
physician about
whatever.
why they
yeah. So I don't know how we go forward, but I feel like having these restrictions only
Mm-hmm.
plays into the like martyr government's out to get us narrative, and is really divisive in that way, even though I think it's very dumb. I think it'll just cause more trouble than it's worth. I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, I don't know either. But the idea that and to back up the story, the Florida legislature signed by Governor DeSantis, a guy who earns on a daily basis, this guy has got to go status. Governor DeSantis signed this saying that private businesses cannot require passports. Think about how the Republicans who don't want government interference in private business, they don't want government
Right.
regulation. They don't want you telling the private businesses what to do. Leave it up to the market. Let the market decide. Once again, this crowd that says that on one hand and will, with a straight face, tell you they believe that's the best way for America to function, then wants to put all kinds of restrictions on what private industries can and can't do.
Yeah.
So why can't a private business do that? Why don't we let the market decide? Why don't we decide that if the best way to handle this? Well, because now they say, well, because that's discriminatory. Oh, okay. So the government should be involved in stopping discrimination. That would be excellent, wouldn't it? Shall we move
Great,
forward
we're on the
with this
same page.
conversation? Yeah, it's so.
Yeah, but I think
COVID
in
is
cases where it's like, concert venues where it's a ton of people packed in very closely, I think it would make sense to say, hey, if you're going to purchase a ticket to this venue, we need to make sure you don't have a deadly disease. I think that's
there's just
fairly common sense.
And in fact, I was talking to well, I'll just say it, two of my children, adult children, who say they're not going to get the vaccine. And I said, because obviously working down the route of, well, I don't know, maybe working down the route of it helps other people if you get the vaccine because it limits your amount of virus in your body. May have worked. But my argument first was, it's just going to be easier for you. Like if you want to go to a concert, instead of having to go get a COVID test and prove that you're COVID negative, just get the vaccine and be done with it. Like just get it over with and have that, hoping that sort of like the convenience, because I think there's going to still be for a year or 2 years, maybe a lot of liability that people feel if they don't want their restaurant, their concert venue, their sporting event to be seen as a super spreader event. So they're going to continue to put some kind of restrictions in place, it would seem to me. I don't know, but and look, there's no good way to handle this. Like a deadly pandemic does not fit well inside of a free society that wants to just allow increasing amounts of freedom for one another. I would love that. I would love for all of us to be free, people to sort of do what they want. I'd love for people to do the right thing and to care for each other, and that would be awesome. The virus doesn't fit well inside of that. So one's limits have to be put on one's behavior, just like you would have with all the other rules around a venue. How many people can be there, where people can stand, what the lighting needs to be, what the exit lights need to look like, if there's sprinkler systems. We do all kinds of stuff to make the environment safe for people. We make people wear shoes and shirts and stuff, and public decency clauses, like just all kinds of stuff we do for this. This is one of those. It seems to me. That'd be the way to go. All right, hey, more things happening in the news. So here in Minneapolis, it's going to be 82 degrees today in early April, which we just all smile and like, that's awesome, because last year at Easter time, there was 16 inches of snow. So granted, Easter moves a week or two, from last year to this year. But this is a big shift. And that raises this new weather story. Back in February, the National Oceanic Administration has said that they're going to update what they use to determine what normal temperatures are. Dan, I had no idea of this. This is fascinating. When they say today is 5 degrees above normal, today's, the normal high is 59 degrees. Well, obviously, I hadn't thought about this, but obviously normal is in relationship to something. Normal for when? And I guess I thought it was the entirety of keeping track when they've started keeping track of weather highs and lows.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out it's only a 30-year block. So until now, it was 1980 to 2010. That was the 30-year block that they ran the averages on.
And now
so
they're
then they would
shifting that
say in
window.
2000, now they're moving it 10 years forward from 1990 to 2020. That 30-year period. Here's why that's important. The last 10 years have been the warmest 10 years on record. So it's going to bump up the average temperatures. That might be a degree or degree and a half. Turns out that in spring in Fargo, North Dakota, it's actually a tad bit cooler in the spring than other places. So a little bit of adjustment about what's happened in the last 10 years. But almost everywhere else in the United States, the average temperature in the last 10 years was so much higher than the previous 30 years that it's going to move the average up. So the new set of 1990 to 2020 is going to now have people saying that we won't have as many above normal days. And this is where the climate scientists are worried, because now they think people are going to start hearing that there's less days that are above normal, and they're not going to know that the climate is getting warmer over time, which also plays out in our weather over time. And they're nervous that it's going to change the narrative in people's minds. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
Who had any idea about this? Well,
Yeah, we moved
obviously.
the goalpost, and now it's not as warm as it was last year.
Yes, I mean it's just normal.
Everything's
now.
fine now.
Whew, I'm glad we got back to normal temperatures by moving normal.
Right.
I mean, I guess it's like, it's probably like other things, like height and weight of American citizens has gone up. So average is now just more than it used to be, because the climate is actually warming over these 10 years. So that's a fascinating piece of data. So when you hear new normal, or when you hear normal temperatures, and this all starts in May, so it's going to jump up, and an update on what we mean by normal. There's just something beautiful about that. There's almost something poetic about the idea that we're going to update our norms. But wouldn't it be great if we did that across other issues in our society? Like we said, hey, let's have a date. We'll go from this date to this date, and on May 1st, we're just going to shift to a new set of norms, a new set of a new baseline by which we compare things. That's it seems to me there's something kind of great in there. A little commercial break here. That Vote Common Good is offering a webinar on the threat of Christian nationalism. Starts tomorrow night, and each Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Do your own calculations, especially those of you in Arizona that I have no idea what time zone you're on now, because you don't do daylight savings time. But 8 p.m. Eastern time till 9:15, a webinar for pastors, faith communities, and individuals on how to respond to the threat of Christian nationalism. We have some of the best experts in the entire country that are joining us. It's going to really be a great experience. People are asking when they see the promotion go out about this, if they can watch it later, if they're not available at 8 p.m. Eastern time on the next 4 Tuesdays, the 6th, the 13th, the 20th, and the 27th of April. Yes, it will be broadcast widely. I mean, really broadly cast on social media networks, Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, Twitch, all those places. So you can just go back and watch them in those spots. If you want to be part of the actual dynamic of it all, if you want to be in on it and you want to connect and ask some questions and all the rest, you can register over at votecommongood.com, and that'll get you the Zoom link. So then you can connect through Zoom, and the rest of it will be connecting through the other social networks. So starting tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern time, a really important, and it's really coming together well. It's going to be a great webinar on the threat of Christian nationalism, a faithful response for the common good.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that.
Hop-de-doody. So I think I will try to mention that again at the end of this, just to remind you that thing is coming. Hey, the Chauvin trial this week, Dan, it's moves into its second week, and last week was painful and riveting. So many people were taken aback by the emotional pain of the witnesses to the murder. And this week, apparently, the topic of witnesses shifts. Started last week when the longest serving person on the Minneapolis police force gave his commentary on what he thought about the behavior of Derek Chauvin and the other officers. And he said it was, in his mind, totally unacceptable, nothing to match his training at all. He wasn't trained that way. That's not how it should go. And that was devastating testimony. This week, it's going to include others from the police force, including Police Chief Arredondo, who fired the Chauvin and the other 3 officers the day after the video became aware. They became aware of the video. So he's going to be. So their position was, for him as the captain, their behavior violated their standard of being a police officer. This case is so clearly moving against Chauvin. It needs to. I'm glad that it is. We mentioned this last week, but I'm really beginning to wonder if there's not going to be a plea that Chauvin at some point will just say, "Let me see if I can, plead to one of the charges and try then to negotiate something around sentencing." And sort of spare the country and the city all the other efforts that go into the finalizing of this case. I think that very well could be the case. I kind of hope that it is. That's my take on it. Did you watch much of it last week?
I just watched some highlights, and just devastating for folks to have to relive the trauma of that day, especially these young eyewitnesses. Just heartbreaking testimony. And it's like we all saw it with our own eyes, whether you were there on the street or you saw the video of it. We all know what we saw. We saw someone take another person's life. And if the justice system doesn't say that's the case and enact some sort of justice, then we've got bigger problems. And we know that we do have bigger problems, that often in cases where it's equally clear or just a little more muddy on what happened, if there's just a millimeter of space between what we see with our eyes and what might have happened or what someone might have thought, they might have been afraid for their lives, etc. We see too many times where police officers don't receive the justice that a non-uniformed person would. So hopefully there's some semblance of justice in this.
Yeah, and you just think about the range of justice that we try to get in this society, and it's a mess, right? Our rules that guide the decisions of prosecutions and of sentencing are all over the place, right? So many people in jail for drug offenses that ruin their lives. And
nonviolent, yeah.
Just outrageous levels of turning people into criminals. And now there's movements all over the country to decriminalize those actions. Candidate Biden even said that he thought that no one for possession or use of drugs should be criminally prosecuted. They should be supported with treatment, not with punishment. I sure hope we do that. And then you have to look back over our whole society and recognize all the ways that we harm so many people for really bad laws, really bad judgments of what was criminal behavior or not.
Yeah.
You think about the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol, and they can't really find good laws to prosecute people on. So they're having to use maybe conspiracy and trespassing. Then the lawmaker in Georgia who knocks on the door when this bill is going to be signed that she believes is going to stop voter access, and she's arrested and could do months in prison for it. It's just a mess all over. And so the dynamisms of people's behavior is not matched by anything that a criminal justice system can do. So I'm not making any excuses. Just think we all have to recognize that the system is insufficient for the realities
Right.
that exist.
Well, the
But
system
on
wasn't
this one,
built for this. The system wasn't
that's right.
built for justice for poor people or people that are not white male land owning voters. The system is a carryover from early colonial days and then early days as a nation when, police were used just to protect private property of the wealthy. Like this system wasn't designed for the majority of Americans.
Yeah, and I just hope we get it close to being right in the Chauvin case.
Yeah.
Right. It's something else. In Minneapolis, there's a big push, and it was happening over the weekend, people going door to door, getting folks to sign on to a petition asking for a new community service force, basically trying to put together something to replace the structure that we have of policing. And I really hope that catches on here where I live and around the country, that we really do start having a serious conversation about how we think the world needs to be dealt with, and what are the responses that need to be in place to care for someone.
Yeah.
You could tell in the Chauvin trial, if you watch some of the details, when the paramedics and the person who just came by, and she was an EMT from the fire department, how the paramedic and the EMT thought about someone like George Floyd as their patient that they needed to make safe and healthy,
Right.
and how the police think about the person as a threat that needs to be neutralized. And that conflict, that struggle, that's like, sure, it would be great if, whatever system we have could flexibly accommodate threats when they exist so that a person is not harmful to themselves or others, and also think about their care. But right now, the system is so out of balance. If you have any interaction with a police officer almost across the board, it is a hostile environment for most people. I mean, unless you're in a place where the police are working very hard to have community relations and are designed to protect and to serve you and to keep you safe. And it can just feel very, very hostile. And that's something we just have to get away from, because there's a lot of people who want and need the support of their city and county governments. And that includes having some sort of a security force or some sort of a community safety force of some kind. And when the conflict between the fire department, the paramedics, feels in opposition to the police, well, that shouldn't be the case.
Right.
And lots of times it's not, right? They find those that's syncopathic life, but so often it's also not that way. And this is really the thing that we have to find a way to deal with in this society. And we haven't reconciled since the kind of militarization and the aggressive stance of the police. That, in some people would talk about going all the way back to the 1990s in New York, and Los Angeles, where the big push started for the police to become a force that was on the side of the city to enforce the city's outcome when it came to destruction of property and so on, called the broken windows philosophy that of all people,
Giuliani,
Rudy
right?
Giuliani, who was thrust into prominent behavior or prominent visibility because of his behavior around September 11th, which even when you look back on that now, you're like, yeah, he was kind of a war hawk back then. Like that, you could see the signs of all this. But so we've had 35 years of a movement toward the policing being seen as protecting themselves and protecting the properties and so on, and not protecting the citizens. So the question of to serve and protect has become very questionable about to serve and protect whom. And people in certain communities, especially Black communities in America, have always felt that way, that the police force was not there to protect them. It was there to protect people from them. And man, you can just, that whole Chauvin trial, you can feel it and see it in the video that they show and the conversations that are happening, that they kept this man pinned to the ground because they were afraid. And the defense that the reason they kept him pinned down is because they were afraid of the people around them, blaming the very citizens of Minneapolis for their for their causing the death of George Floyd. That's the permeating perspective of so much policing in America.
Yeah.
That they are first and foremost seeing citizens as a threat. Is just but then there's threats, right? A person took a car and rammed it into the Capitol Police on Friday and killed one person and injured another, and then attacked another officer with a knife, was shot and killed. Yeah, they do that. The people, the insurrectionists, Trump supporting insurrectionists, grabbed police officers and beat them and killed one of them. And there are real threats to police officers. Yeah. There are, and this all has to be accommodated into an understanding of what kind of world are we going to live in, and what kind of world do we want. And it's not just police officers. This other story of this week of an Asian American woman who was stabbed to death in an act of racial violence. And then they say the police don't suspect that race was the motive. I guess, yes, random acts of violence can fall on all kinds of people. But in this climate that we're in, for an Asian woman to be stabbed to death while walking her dogs, and then to have to land on, well, it was racial or not racial, much like the murders in Atlanta. I mean, this stuff, the way race works, it seems to me, is that it's not always as clear as someone writes a manifesto before they commit their acts of violence, like the Charleston shooter did, or others. That race and racial hatred and racial violence simmers below the surface. And it's an important thing that we really have to take seriously.
Yeah.
The Asian population in the United States is rather small. Even in places where there's a concentration, it's still rather small. And for the number of Asian people in this country to be the victims of this kind of violence, that's a real problem, right? Mm-hmm. That is a real, the numbers belie the fact that it's not targeting of Asians. And so often that it's matched, even the things that now so many Asian people are reporting about what people say to them, and how it goes back to COVID. Now, is COVID-19 the newest rationale for why people are acting this way? Yes, likely. In other words, Asian hate was not born simply because Donald Trump was blaming it on China and calling it the Kung flu and using racial terms to mock Asian people. So yes, they're using it now because it exists, but it also, the way hate works, like the way love works, is that it spawns on itself. It breeds in environments where that's the norm, and that's what's happening in these death cases and these attack cases and these slurs that are going on. Is that it starts to spread even more, and it's really the narrative of radicalized violence in this country is something that's gone on a long time, from our very beginning, and has to be addressed all the time. It's a constancy that these things need to be addressed, and when they rise to the public awareness, it's really important that that happens.
Yeah.
And I've been noticing something on the news, on the broadcast television side of the news. How many more Asian reporters are on the news? I think it's kind of a good thing, right? Mm. Like I'm noticing it. It's more often. There are not nearly enough Asian faces reporting the news. Like there aren't enough Black faces reporting the news in so many of our sort of mainstream settings. But just in the last couple of months, I've been noticing more and more when they cut to a reporter, and not just about issues around Asian violence and Asian hate or hate toward Asians, but just in other news stories. I think we're starting to recognize what normalization and isolation looks like. Yeah, representation. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it goes beyond You know, acts of violence are sort of the tip of the iceberg, right? But most Asian Americans live with a certain level that's just below the surface of microaggressions and stereotypes, and that's just the norm for them, is to have to put up with a certain level of racism, even if the rest of us don't notice it. And so the fact that it's come to light now, like you said, it's not a new problem that people are hating each other. It's just come to light in a horrific way, and just points out that we still have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and it's just constant. I mean, the ability for human beings to separate out other human beings and to target them as being less valid, that is consistently taking place around the world and in every society, right?
Yeah.
And what a just, righteous society, a common good society has to do is to name it, to act, to replace it with another way of living and being. So it's, I watched this video that was on being an anti-racist, and it was a TED talk, and the person used this really wonderful analogy. He's of mixed race, he says, and so he's grown up in a world where he's had to understand both sides, with a mom being white and a dad being black. And he said, if you become a trainer of racial bias, and he said, if you think about your own racism as like your tonsils, and you can have your tonsils removed. And if you think I've had my racism removed because I went through a training or I did a thing or something happened and now my racism is gone, that's one approach. He said the other approach is to think about racism as oral hygiene, that every day, because you use your teeth, because you use your mouth, you're going to get things stuck in your teeth and in your gums, and you need to clean that out every day. And if someone comes to you and says, hey, you have something in your tooth, you don't say to them, no, I brushed my teeth 3 days ago. There's no way I could have something in there. It's something that needs to be updated on a regular basis. And his point is, we should stop thinking about being a racist as it's like your tonsils that you had taken out and removed, and something you have to stay on top of all the time, because our life in the world that we live in is going to continue to create these biases that we need to address. That was a very helpful way to think about racism, so that he's trying to remove the sting of someone being able to say, oh yeah, I have attitudes, ideas, words, patterns, behaviors that don't match what I want to be the case. So can you help me, either with a mirror or someone else, to see if there's something that's not the way that you want it to be, in oral hygiene metaphor. Well, this is the kind of thing that we have to think about across humanity, is that for whatever reason, human beings have a way to create this caste system, whether it's official, like in some parts of India, or less official and more built into our psyche. And it's real. And it has to be addressed on a regular basis, right? This is the struggle with it all, is that you have to find a way to deal with it on a daily, ongoing basis. And the fact that some people feel, and I've heard people say this, they're like, God, it just keeps coming. Like, it's Black Lives Matter, and now it's Asian people, and that's watching stuff about queer and trans people. I have to figure out, and they'll say this, when's it ever going to end? Right. And that's why this idea of this is not something you deal with once and we set aside, or we deal with as a society and we move beyond, but that we have to learn that these biases keep coming up. And travel the world, go to other places. You will find out that somebody lives on the wrong side of a border, or someone's from the wrong tribe, or someone's religion is practiced differently than someone else's religion, or someone's political party is different than someone else's political party. All over the world, you will see this kind of bigotry and bias that is created. A lot of it has to do with skin tone and skin color. Colorism is an enormously powerful function in lots of biases around the world. So it's not just you or just our society. There's something in our humanity that keeps showing up, and we have to be attentive to it all the time. It's more like daily hygiene than it is like solving for a problem.
Yeah.
And this is the way I think that we just have to address these issues. So when someone feels themselves getting tired of the conversation about the new group that now needs us to pay attention to their suffering, yes, we have to pay attention to their suffering. The new
Because
group,
we
and that's
haven't
because
paid
that's the way it
enough
works.
attention so far. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can't. Yes, and you can't pay enough attention, right? There's this isn't about did you work hard, did you not work hard. Like you can work as hard as you want on oral hygiene, and even if you don't eat, your mouth is going to start to create acids and chemicals that need to be dealt with. There's something in the system that's irrespective of how hard you've worked or how sincere you are. So working on this as individuals and as societies, it's just necessary. No matter how hard we've worked, it lives with us. It's perpetual.
Yeah.
And so we need to deal with it as a perpetual ongoing growth area. Not to say that we can't get better in some ways, but look, every day there's a new group of people who have a birthday and they become, they mark being a year older. And every 10 years, there's a whole new batch of people that used to be 10 years old and now are 20 years old. Like there's a continuation of the human flow. So there's new people that have to go through all this stuff themselves. So yes, as a society, even if you've awakened, there's other people for whom they're just coming into awareness of these things. So it's perpetual by design. It's not perpetual because we can't seem to get it right. It's perpetual because that's how you get it right.
Right. And I feel like that's a good segue to what's happening at the border. You read a headline like this: border crossings are at a 15-year high. Some people will read that headline and it'll bring up fear and anxiety over the invasion, quote unquote. And then other people who maybe sit on a different side or a different perspective say, yeah, I think people would want to come to this country. I can see why they might want to come here, and maybe we should welcome them in a safe and humane way. And so I feel like the issue at the border is another litmus test to how much time we've spent deconstructing and decolonizing, and hopefully we can approach this with a little more compassion than we have with other issues. So.
Yeah, and on this one, look, it's to a lot of people's minds, what they hear when they read a headline like this in the Washington Post: border crossings in March jumped to the highest level in 15 years, data shows. A lot of people in their mind think that means that more illegal immigrants snuck into the country and they caught more people than any time in the last 15 years. That's not what this headline's about. This headline's about people who are crossing the border intentionally to be in contact with United States federal agents. They're refugees seeking refugee or asylum status, or asking for immigration proceedings to begin. That's different than the people who are sneaking across and don't want to get caught. The reason the numbers are high now, and 15 years ago was 2006, the reason the numbers were that high in March 2006 was because of humanitarian crises in Central American countries, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras specifically. So those people are coming to the United States seeking help, not just seeking to immigrate. Separating out our understanding of people who want to come to this country to work and to migrate and to move here versus those who are coming because they're in dire need is really important. And our border structure should not be the mechanism that differentiates those two. The problem with the way the border is designed and with the Homeland Security running it as a military threat complex is that it treats everyone like they're a threat. Mm-hmm. So we're using a threat response to deal with refugees. So what they're trying to do, and I just talked to an an attorney who works for the federal government about this, and she works, in this arena. And she said, what we're trying to do is quickly move people from interacting with Homeland Security to dealing with Health and Human Services. Now, even those two titles are important, right? Homeland Security and Health and Human Services. What we currently have is a broken structure to deal with people crossing the border. So people who are coming seeking refugee status, children, families, others who need help because of droughts, hurricanes, violence, they're being met by the people whose job it is to make sure bad people don't come into our country. The first thing that has to happen, and in this article, it even describes that what this other group that they call, and the language that Homeland Security uses about human beings is just shocking to me, but it calls them the getaways, and this other kind of language, like the people who snuck in, but we couldn't catch them because they were going across the Rio Grande and climbing over a hill and trying to sneak in because we were busy dealing with these 170,000 refugees coming in. This is the very problem, right? That Homeland Security should be like creating secure responses, and and Human Services should be dealing with servicing humanity that's in crisis. But because of our current setup, because of the militarization of the border, because of the decisions made by the Trump administration, the first contact and almost only contact for a very long period of time is with Homeland Security. So there's some answers to this, and the border interaction is not the place where this should happen. So what the Biden administration now is trying to do is to swarm in Health and Human Services responses to this issue. And why, as a country, if in 2006 we had this huge upswing, and in 2016 we had this huge upswing, in 2019, and now in 2021, why don't we build a system that can accommodate the realities of our hemisphere, that this is going to happen, instead of saying, which what the Trump administration did, and a lot of Democrats cheered him on for this, which was to say, create a less inviting border and then maybe they won't come. Look, the situation in these countries, and I've spent a lot of time in Guatemala, the situation in these countries is so bad that no matter how unaccommodating of a system you created the border, they're still going to come. This is just not dealing with the reality of why people will traipse across Mexico, putting their lives and the lives of their children at risk. Why would they do that? Well, it's not so simple as simply to say they just really want to come here. I mean, we've got Disneyland and there's really great jobs. When your choice is starvation or pains or violence
murder at the hand of gangs or cartels, yeah.
I wrote this book called Outdoing Jesus, and one of the miracles in it is this dad who comes to Jesus and says to him, "Hey, my son is a fever. Can you come and heal him?" And Jesus says, I don't have to come. Your son's going to be well." And the man on his way back is met by people from his household that tell him that the boy's better, and it happened around the very same hour when Jesus said these words, right? Here's this story. Well, one way to read that story is to pick up Outdoing Jesus at your local book retailer on Amazon.com. The other way is to read it like this. Here's a dad who had to cross cultural boundaries of a Roman military member going to a Jewish mystic and saying, "I need your help." Why did he do it? Why did he break cultural norms? Why did he break cultural norms for Jewish people like Jesus and for Romans like him? Why did he put himself in all this? Why did he walk for a day and a half and then walk back for a day and a half? Why did he do all this? Because parents will do this for their kids. This is how humanity spread around the globe. I mean, this is how we've ended up with different races on the planet, is because people have trekked and left and went from place to place to find life. This is what you do. So to sit back as Americans, if we do, and to say, well, what are they doing coming? Let's just make it a less accommodating environment, like Jeff Sessions, former Secretary of or former Attorney General, said. well, let's just make it unaccommodating to them and tell them we have laws. And if you don't follow our laws, then you're violating God. Like just this nonsense about what drives someone to do this. I mean, I know people who think that about immigrants coming into this country as refugees and asylum seekers, but then they will work their own lives to the bone to serve their own kids. It just is. And we think somehow, no, these people, because they're being met by Homeland Security or Ted Cruz in a duck hunting jacket out in a military boat looking like a tough guy that's got guns on the boat because they're going to stop these terrorists from sneaking into the country. That's not what's going on. All that back to this headline. This headline is not about people sneaking into the country. It's a refugee crisis on our border. Now, we can have a whole conversation about if people should receive refugee status, if they should be asylum seekers or not, all the rest of that. Absolutely, we should. But the conversation we need to make sure doesn't drift into these are people sneaking in. The reason they know how many there are and they keep catching all of them, 170,000 of them in March, is because the people are walking up saying, I need your help. Can you help me?
Yeah.
Can I go with you? Can you put me in one of these camps? And some of these people for nearly a year have been in camps on the other side of the Mexico border in what the Trump administration called the Remain in Mexico policy. And that's put them in all kinds of struggle. So they're finally starting to come across. So we got to solve this not at the border, not with Homeland Security, but with our immigration and refugee laws. And we have to figure out how to have a whole totally different conversation about that, which Vote Common Good is going to help all of us do this fall. A lot more coming on that all pretty soon.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of these headlines are just, who do we want to be as a nation? Do we want to be a cruel nation that makes it intentionally cruel to try to cross our border so that people don't want to come here? Is it a country where our laws don't protect the majority of citizens and justice is only for those with the means to get it, those with the wealth to hire an attorney that will get it for them? Who do we want to be as a country? And I think for many folks, we want to be a country of compassion and humanity and generosity, but it's like that dental hygiene thing. We have to decide every day if we're going to lean into those impulses or if we're going to, succumb to entropy and go back to a fear-based approach to the rest of the world and our neighbors.
Yeah, that's really well said. Who do we want to be? That's probably better language than what sometimes gets used by the Biden administration, which is, this isn't who we are. No, we are. We are the country that put these people over there. We are the people that took that's who we are. Who do we want to be?
Yeah.
Where are we going to leave? I think about Genesis B., the poet laureate of the Vote Common Good experience, and she had this poem that she did, which asked that question. What would you do?
Mm-hmm.
Who do you want to be? What kind of country? This is the conversation we should be having as a society. That's why we talk about it here. That's why we're going to keep talking about it in the other work that we do, and we hope that it leads to a common good experience for people all over the country. So join us tomorrow night, Tuesday night, April 6th, for our first webinar on the threat of Christian nationalism, a faithful response for the common good. Faith communities, pastors, individuals, anyone. It's free. I mean, you're going to get hit up with a donation request, of course, but it's free. You just come in. You can go to votecommongood.com and sign up to be in the Zoom, or you can watch it on any of our social media outlets. It'll be happening there. So we really would love to see you there. And then tomorrow, it's Politics Day around here. And also a day when I think I have to get a new water heater because my water heater is leaking. And now I'm all worried that the water heater delivery or water heater repair guy is going to come right during the show time. I don't know what to do. But at 10 a.m. Central Time, Politics for the Common Good here on Vote Common Good's daily podcast. And then Wednesday, we have our Faith Day. Thursday, Issues. Friday, it's Economics. So much going on around here. We want to help you engage in the common good in any way that you can. Dan, good to see you today. Thanks for the good work, and all of you. We will see you tomorrow.
Goodbye, all.